So normally I would wait till 1:05, but I'm gonna get started now. So let's kick off this podcast. So firstly, welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to have you on with us. We're very fortunate today to have Gary Fowler, and he'll be talking about one of the things he's heavily involved with, which is, I'll just say, breakthrough technologies in the area of quantum computing, artificial intelligence, and Web3. So that's the objective of today's discussion, to learn more about what's happening in those areas and what Gary is doing for his day job within it. So if you don't mind, James, go to the next slide, please. So you can't have a conversation or a presentation without a disclaimer. Yes, this is our disclaimer. Bottom line, anything we do that's educational is fair game. Anything we do related to investment advice is regulated. And the intention on this call is to be in the education space, to be informative and helpful. If we do veer into financial advice, anything that we do, you have to consult with your own professionals to form your own conclusions, but that's the gist of the disclaimer. So now that that's out of the way, James, go to the next slide, please. So here's a slide that we've used in the past, but it's very important to reinforce what we do at Bridgepoint in our mastermind group. And our mastermind group is intended to help people like those in this call increase their passive income. We're all, at the moment, highly dependent with our salaries and wages, but we want to, over time, be more dependent and benefit from passive income. So we want our money to work for us, grow our wealth, and achieve financial independence. So if we do want to work, it's because it's our choice, not because we have to. And that's what you see here is part of how we get to that outcome. So long story short, we help people grow their net worth. Things like trust and estate planning. Just remember, in the US, anybody can sue anybody anytime for anything. That's just the world of America. So you need to have things that protect your assets, as well as, depending on what your objectives are in terms of getting assets out of your estate to your kids, your grandkids, your charitable endeavors, whatever it is, that's an important element of your wealth. Tax planning, as I tell people, a monkey gets a tax return. That's not unique. That's not that powerful. Tax planning is very powerful. You can reduce your tax burden by having the right planning done in advance. And lastly, insurance. And for us, insurance has multiple value propositions in wealth management, but at its essence, done right, it's a tax-deferred vehicle. An IRA is a tax-deferred vehicle. A 401k plan is a tax-deferred vehicle. Any money in those vehicles gets to scale, grow, compound on a tax-free basis. Insurance programs like private placement life insurance do the same thing. Last week, we had a podcast on private placement life insurance. It's posted on our YouTube channel. If you missed it, that's your chance to reconsume that content. But this particular product is something I was heavily involved with at the McKinsey investment office, and we deployed it for the partners very effectively, and it's a great product done right. So that's a little bit about our mastermind group. So go to the next slide, please. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but two key takeaways. Asset allocation is the name of the game in terms of growing your wealth and doing the correct asset allocation. So the 60-40 model portfolio was not something that we ever advocated. And frankly, this year it's been a disaster. People opening up their things like their IRA statements, 401k statements for Q2, see big fat losses. So suddenly people are waking up to the fact that 60-40 doesn't work. And lastly, on the right, you can see three separate portfolios. We advocate the portfolio we call the optimal portfolio, which has the highest return with the least risk of those three sample portfolios. So that's a little bit about our private wealth. If this is something you want to avail yourself to, we're more than happy to discuss this with you. This is really two things. This is something we've successfully deployed through the McKinsey investment office for McKinsey and Company, the consulting firm. It's something we've been doing for many years inside of Bridgepoint, and is something that we're happy to share with the people on this call. So go to the next slide, please. Now that I'm done with my speech, people are here to hear what Gary has to say. And firstly, Gary, would you be kind enough to tell the audience a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. Some of you know me here. My name's Gary Fowler. I'm a serial entrepreneur and investor. I've been involved in 17 startups and several unicorns. I was on the original management team at Click Software, which was sold to Salesforce for $1.35 billion. I'm also the co-founder of Eva.ai, which was recently acquired by Vizira in Canada. Love artificial intelligence and quantum computing. I've written 180 articles, and we travel the world looking for the best companies. And today we're in 47 countries. And that is GSD, which is Get Shit Done Venture Studio, which is a premier AI and quantum venture studio located, yes, in the heart of Silicon Valley, Palo Alto.
Okay, well, Gary, thank you for that. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, remember this topic today is quantum computing, artificial intelligence, and Web3. And we just want to at least start with something in writing that people can take away with them. But I'm going to throw it over to Gary. So quantum computing, what is it and why do we need it?
That's a good point, Mark. So I like to paint pictures with words. Let's look at our lives. So let's talk about the power of a quantum computer. A quantum computer, if you compared it to a supercomputer today, what would take 10,000 years on a supercomputer takes 200 seconds on a quantum. Look at this, Mark. Look at all the data that's around us every day. Look in your email. How many times a week do you say, I know that email file exists, but I can't find it? Somebody said, I sent you an email, but I can't find it, or a message. We're inundated with data, infobesity. So we need tools like artificial intelligence with deep learning to be able to help us to sift through that data. Think about your own world. You've got about 300,000 items in your personal cloud. The entire web in 1996 was 257,000 websites. You, Mark, have more information in your personal cloud than the entire web. The problem is it's following the same trajectory. By that, I mean it's doubling every year. In 5 years, you're going to have 10 million items. We need tools to be able to help us make a better decision. And if we look at the web, Web3, the evolution of the web, why do we need Web3? Because we're looking at things entirely differently. Things like token economics, smart contracts. You know how it is when you send your HIPAA information to your doctor? Imagine have a web that's trusted, that's decentralized. These technologies are going to help us be able to chart the path for the future. We need artificial intelligence. Think about drug discovery. Think about the supply chain for it. We couldn't get a roll of toilet paper during the pandemic, and here we are, the pinnacle of society. We need technologies out there to help us be able to make our lives optimized and better. And all three of these are integrated together to be able to help us solve those problems.
Well, I guess I'll say no argument. I'm going to ask you a different question. What should my experience really in technology started in the biotech space? I'm going to ask you, what should we be afraid of? But I'll give you by context. When I did a neuroscience biotech company in Cambridge, Massachusetts, there was a neighborhood watch group. Just to show you how times have changed, we were working on the live AIDS virus at our company, and people were afraid that somehow that virus would get into the air and it would spread AIDS to the local community, et cetera. So they had a watch group that literally had to bless the tests or experiments that we would do. So point is, regulation doesn't keep pace with technology, it lags. So it scares the bejesus out of people because they're afraid of what can happen. So with these breakthrough technologies, what should people be afraid of, or what should they be aware of?
I mean, the situation is, in artificial intelligence, I write a lot about compassion and empathy. If we have a pragmatic, sometimes we don't treat each other right, Mark. And if we train a computer, an AI system, a tool that is like us, maybe nothing good happens. I think we need to go out and train a system with empathy and compassion. And some of these new unsupervised models out there are doing just that. The other thing, look at it like this. It's going to be a point in a not too distant future where you're going to have an intelligent assistant that's like your grandmother that loves you no matter what. And the idea is to build these systems the way we would want to be treated and the way we want to treat other people. So the training sets need to include that. And in terms of drug discovery, I mean, think about it. During the pandemic, I happened to be on one of the panels directly. During the pandemic, at the very beginning of the pandemic, we look at 1918 and the Spanish flu compared to with COVID. In 4 years, it decimated the world. At the same time, researchers needed to figure out ways that they could come up with a drug in a very short period. There were no longer timeframes of 12 years. So using artificial intelligence to do modeling for drug discovery opened up an entirely new area. The problem is before, we just took a lot of time. We didn't do it. But the digital transformation and COVID really pushed us. Look at it now, we're on Zoom. I remember 8 years ago when I was one of the first Zoom users, and people used to say to me, why do I need another link? We need another link because we need to be able to communicate, to share ideas, to solve these problems that are in front of us. And those companies that do that are going to win. Those companies that do that are going to be successful. And those are companies that are very interesting because they're going to be the next Twitters and Facebooks of the world.
I want to just throw, as I hear you speak, what jumps into my head was a quote, you mentioned your grandma, but basically necessity is the mother of invention. And you use the example of COVID, and I'll just bring that down to the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, which were discovered and commercialized in record time. And God knows the world needed it, and they got them out the door and in people's arms in record time. So the things that the world is facing now, whether it's the things like global warming, which Guy mentioned with her movie upcoming, things, the supply chain, we can go on and on. There's so many things that are being disrupted by these technologies, but I want to get to that in a little bit. So maybe we'll just put a pin in that for now. Sure. Is there anything you want to say regarding Web3 that we haven't touched on?
Well, I want to say one thing because you brought up a good point. You know, you talked about sometimes, you know, we were forced to go ahead with COVID and during the COVID with the digital transformation. But think about this. I read some articles at the turn of the century, the last century, and they talked about horses versus cars. And people wrote articles. Why would we want to use this dangerous thing? It can blow up. And what happened? Things change very quickly. So these are the frontiers. Sometimes humanity is a little bit stubborn about moving forward, but I'm sure we will. Web3, if we look at it, I mean, we need to go down through and coordinate better. We need security and privacy at a different level than we've ever had before. We need to do things like tokenization. Our world is changing from this physical world to a virtual world. Having an enabler of the Web 3.0, it's similar to what happened, you know, when we look at, when we look at the beginning of the World Wide Web, right? When it started and the browsers, we're in another evolution of society. This is to bring us together. Think about it. We got 1.4 billion people in 54 countries in Africa, over 1 billion people in India, 647 million people in the Latin America. We have to go down through and communicate better. These enabling technology of the web are the way it's going to happen. These are the highways of information for the future that have never existed before. We are at a very fundamental level today at Web 2, but this is going to take us quantum leaps forward. We need all three of these technologies to help us move. Mark, you know, we've got a lot of challenges in front of us with global warming. Average temperatures could be up as high as 9 degrees Fahrenheit by the end of this century. Look what's happening. London was what, 105 degrees yesterday or 115? We need to go down through and solve these problems. Technologies that we have like IoT to be able to help us understand where the water's cold, where the water's warm, how we can get more crops because we need to increase the irrigation. Those technologies are central. We need desalination. We need artificial intelligence to help us in those models too. From my standpoint, we have such a beautiful, beautiful world. We're going to increase the population from 8 billion to 13 billion at the end of this century. We need to figure out, one, how to communicate better, how to be able to feed ourselves better. By 2050, we have to double the food supply to feed everybody. And by the way, we can't increase the number of cows, but 26% of the pollution is methane gas. So we can't we've got to look at plant-based protein. This is like, keep it simple, stupid. So look at our lives. There is global warming. What are we going to do? As we look at our world, it's going to change. The bread basket's going to move in the United States up to Canada. It's going to move, right? We're going to have Russia's going to become a bread basket too. Now we've got to figure out, how do we make our water supply better? How do we deal with these torrential rainstorms, and then at the same time, dry conditions that are evaporating lakes and Lake Mead? But we have the technology to do it. We just need to enable it and accept it. And you're right, people are stubborn, just like at the beginning of the last century. But I'm sure, I have a confidence in humanity that we can do it. But now's the time to invest. It's like when I first started my first e-commerce consulting company back in 1997, 1998. People said, Amazon's just for books. I said, you're wrong. It's a $30 billion cottage industry. And the business took off like crazy. Right after that, the company was called Broadient. It's the same situation now. We're in an evolution of something that's going to change humanity. We just need to embrace it, accept it, and figure out a way that it's equally distributed around the world. It's not just for us here in the US or in France, where my friends are, or in India. It's about for everybody around the world. How can we share and help each other?
Well, you're quite the evangelist for these technologies, and for many reasons, I hope you're correct. And if I may, let's just go to the next slide. So GSD Ventures, maybe Gary, what does GSD stand for? Hopefully people won't be offended by your definition.
Well, I'll make it easy. It's get stuff done. Let's just say that. I'll make it easy for the audience. I don't want to offend anybody, but I came up with it because it's not about the talk, Mark. It's about the execution. Part of the problem we have in life is we talk about things we don't execute, and we've come up with a fundamentally new model for that.
Okay, great. Go to the next slide, please. I love this quote, and it's a quote that I think you should frankly trademark if it's trademarkable, because I think it's spot on. So read the quote and tell us why you came up with that.
Well, because intellectual capacity is evenly spread around the world, but opportunities are not. That's a basic thesis. I have companies in Nigeria and Zambia and Ghana and South Africa today. These are places where there's 235 million people in Nigeria, some of the best AI talent in the world. We need to go out and work together to create these companies. These are where the next unicorn. Flutterwave, it's $1 billion company out of Nigeria. Go to places where other people don't. Get the deals before other people see them. Cultivate them.
All right, well said. Next slide, please. So go ahead. No, I'm just saying these are massive, massive markets, but maybe you want to just touch on a few key takeaways here.
Well, think about it. AI is really going to permeate our AI, machine learning, deep learning is going to permeate all parts of our life, and already has, right? We just don't realize it. Think about it. Every day you're on Google, you're using some of the most advanced artificial intelligence in the world. You use your phone. You're using iTunes. The AI is there. You drive in your Tesla. So the situation is, but this market is just going to rapidly increase. It is going to go to estimated to go to 1.8 trillion by 2030 or more. In quantum computing, think about the marriage between quantum and artificial intelligence. Think about a system, as I said, that can process something that would take 10,000 years in 200 seconds. That's an exact statistic from Google, by the way. So imagine having that powered with artificial intelligence to solve a lot of the problems. Think about the kind of drugs we can discover, like COVID was done on a quantum computer, some of the COVID vaccines. We need to go down through and support them, because that's the way we're going to solve a lot of the massive problems. You're right. The market is 18 trillion, estimated to be 18 trillion for quantum. Not a lot of people know about it. They don't know about photons and how quantum computer work. The one thing we say is just, it's incredibly fast. It's an incredibly fast system. Can be 100,000 times faster than a supercomputer today. And in some of the systems, even more today. So Web3, as I said, is really just a vehicle. It's a highway. It's a super highway. Instead of going 35 miles an hour, it'll allow you to go 10,000 on the highway. It just makes it go faster, more secure, and to be able to serve people better.
If I may, just to bring a real life example to quantum, I could do real life examples for AI and Web3, but I'm going to not do that for now. But on the quantum computing side, people probably are aware that Bridgepoint made an investment in an accelerator, although I cringe when I use that word because it's so much more than that. It's called New Lab. And they have a company at New Lab in the quantum space that's been in business, I believe, roughly 4 years. So very early, very young. Its market value, its last financing round was $1.2 billion, 4 years. So my point, these markets are early, but the wealth creation is not. These are some of the most compelling investment opportunities that are out there. And these financings, I call them an upside down pyramid, but early rounds, there's not a lot of money. They're trying to get to their next milestone, and then the valuations explode, the capital influx occurs, and they go on their merry way. But there's enormous wealth opportunity to be created here for people that want to get in early. So we're not here to quote unquote market any specific deal, but the message is these are very hot markets where savvy investors are getting in now and positioned for the huge upside that's coming.
No, I agree completely. I mean, now's the time. You know, the problem is whenever you look at these new markets, people kick themselves if they don't get in. Oh, I should have done it. Well, now's the time. I mean, this is like keep it simple, stupid time. It's not if it's going to happen, it's when. The when is now.
All right, well said. Next slide, please.
So, you know, just a GSD, as I said, it's get stuff done. But we're around the world. We source deals from places like Stanford University, the Unicorn Battle, our own personal network. I've been in technology over 30 years, and I've lived in, so I lived in Germany, lived in part of the European Union, other parts, lived in London, lived in Russia for a little bit of time, and found incredible companies there, but left. So these companies that are out there, these incredible companies are located in different areas. How do you source them? Well, you got to go out, you got to attend the competition. Pegasus that I did, I was on stage with Steve Wozniak. We had 396,000 people, Mark, watching the presentations. It allowed us to be able to have those inbound companies. Some of the companies are here today from France, from all over the world. But these companies are the best in class. What we do is we look for the best, the top 3, the top 5 companies in those areas of AI, Web3, the metaverse, quantum computing that have a chance to be able to change the world. What we do is we're in 47 countries around the world, Mark. We have ambassadors that work with us. I think that may be in another slide, but we work with our ambassadors who are in those countries to help us find the ideas. They are tied in with their ecosystems. They bring them out to us. It's a win-win situation. It's a way we need to tie technology together. So again, everybody has an equal chance to bring their company forward. I don't believe that 9 out of 10 companies, in my opinion, Mark, should fail. It's not about having the wrong technology. It's about not having the venture building to make the company successful.
You're reading my mind. I want to drill into that point that 9 out of 10 companies fail. You're saying it's not the technology. I would call it more on the execution side. So you see these little acorns that could become oak trees, using an analogy here. What are some of the things that you consistently see these acorn companies fail to address that leads to failure? And how do you try, with your approach, your solutions, help them overcome what is avoidable?
Well, part of it's a step-by-step approach. And I know you went to Harvard, so you had those finance classes and financial modeling classes. But, you know, part of it is making them look like a billion-dollar company. So how do you do that? You open the hood. It's like having a Ferrari in your garage, Mark. You got a Ferrari in the garage and only you know it's a Ferrari in the garage. You take it out in the neighborhood and drive it around. Your neighbors know. But the key is execution. Can you win Formula One? What do you need? The right kind of team. So the consistent part is they're open to change. They have the right kind of team and mentality. They're positive, they're optimistic, they can visualize things, the soft side of it. At the same time, understanding who has the technology that can be curated and changed a little bit and shifted, pivoted a little bit to make it an interesting, compelling technology for investors, interesting, compelling technology for partners. So what we want to do in customers, what we want to do is find those companies that can do that. You're right. Not a ton of them fail. I don't believe it should be the case. They fail because sometimes they're technologists that don't have sales and marketing backgrounds. It's hard to present. Sometimes they don't have financial backgrounds. They don't know how to build a model. Well, the key is bringing those resources together to help them, just like you do in a lot of ways. Taking those resources and implanting those resources that can help them build their companies. It's not that they don't have the key technology, it's they don't have the other pieces to make successful. That's where GSD comes in.
All right, well said. Go to the next slide, please.
I talked about it. We have ambassadors in Africa. Most people don't realize there are 54 countries in Africa and 1.4 billion people. So we've gone to Nigeria and Kenya and Ghana and Zambia. We've gone to South Africa. So we work there. We have companies in Egypt, Europe, all over Europe, whether it's Germany or Prague, in the Czech Republic, whether it's Slovakia, wherever it is. Find those ambassadors that can curate the deals and bring them to you. And it's a win-win. We all win in the deal. We're part of the stream. If we look at it, this integrated approach, the Germans have a phrase, Mark, Gestalt, the sum of the parts equal the whole. What we are is creating the out part of the spokes, and we're the hub. The hub's refining those companies to come out on the other end. So they're people just like you that have the contacts with these incredible high net worth individuals and family offices that are looking for curated deals that are some of the best in the world. And if you bring it out, it's kind of like having that Ferrari. If you have a dirty Ferrari and you show it your friends, they're not excited. But you get your friend down there to detail and you bring it out, and it's a whole different deal. Well, what we want to do is not only do the outside, but make sure the engine's tuned up. Make sure that the car is ready to win the race. The startup's ready to become a unicorn.
Oh, well said on that one. I don't own a Ferrari today, but hopefully with your help, I can get there. But thank you. Let's go to the next slide, please.
Not hopefully, you will, Mark.
All right, well done. Thank you. So we have two case studies here. Obviously, there's dozens and dozens of case studies we could put up. So Gary, why did you pick these two, and what do you want to share about them?
Because this is the way it's done. And I'll tell you from two different perspectives. So i2Pure is a company that molecularly isolates iodine. So iodine that you put on your hand, your grandmother or mother would put, it's a red stuff. So they've taken it from 73% effective to anywhere from 85+ effective, depending on the occurrence. Well, you can imagine if you're a hospital. Hospitals are concerned about sepsis. They're concerned about staph infections. Having these technologies, iodine's in virtually every hospital around the world. Sometimes it's called betadine or hexadine. So i2Pure came to us. They had zero revenue, right? When they came in, through the accelerator, they got revenue. And I probably shouldn't say exactly how much they got, but they have enough revenue now to have $100 million valuation. So at the same time, they got $550 million in the pipeline. This is in a year and a half, Mark. And they've got $45 million in licenses executed. The key is it's a nearly a $500 billion market. So imagine how many people, hospitals, taking iodine. Iodine lasts a couple seconds. Well, imagine having a compound that's orders of magnitude more effective. So i2Pure, again, incredible technology. Zozo Day. So if you look at workforce management, the company came to us, they raised a $700,000 round. They got a $30 million institutional round raised as a result of participating in our accelerator, not only because of us, but because we helped them package it properly. They had $4.2 million in revenue. And look at this, Mark, remote workforce management. I just sold my company in remote workforce management. Now, 2 years ago, people said, oh, you can't work from home. You got to come in the office. Then it was, you have to work out of your house. You can't come in the office. So imagine the opportunities with people around the world that have gotten into a situation that they have to work remote. Now imagine technologies to be able to facilitate that relationship. That's what Zozo Day does.
Well, you're wanting me to ask a couple of follow-up questions on remote workforce, even though this is a tech conversation. But
Sure.
The fact is, you have these cause and effects that create unintended consequences. So one of the unintended consequences of COVID was the creation of Zoom and remote work, et cetera. Things like digital health and telemedicine, because people didn't want to go to the doctors and be surrounded by sick people. So all these industries and opportunities get created because of some, I'll just say, critical event.
Catalytic event, right?
They are what they are. Now, with the remote workforce, just close your eyes and tell me in 5 years, are we going to go back to where we were pre-COVID, or what's the workforce of the future going to look like? Are we going to all be remote? Is it going to be a hybrid? What do you think happens?
It's going to be a hybrid, but it's highly efficient. Think about in your life, Mark, how many calls, I was one of the early Zoom users 7 years ago. So people were like, oh, I'm not going to use this. I use Skype. But think about in Mark's world, think about your own situation. Look at where you are. How much more efficient are you on Zoom every single day rather than going down and having lunch with somebody in the center of the city in New York? You're just highly effective. You can cover the globe. If you had to travel and meet all these people around the world, look at the people today. We got people from Fort Lauderdale, people from France, people from China, from all over the world. It's just, it makes us more effective. The key is, again, the driving force, the catalytic event was COVID. But I was on Zoom years before that. It's just, they got 400 million daily active users after COVID, because guess what? That's how the world stayed in business.
So the next software you're going to using now, give us the heads up, because obviously if we put money in Zoom at the early rounds, we'd all be retired right now. So you're obviously a leader in some of these visionary technologies, but keep us in the loop on that, please.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you want, I can talk about them now. So
Well, the answer is we have a few minutes, and I want to open it up to questions. So
okay.
Maybe we can go down that path, or maybe we'll do something else. But let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so we have takeaways here. So this actually, let's get this out of the way and then open up the questions. So we'd like to have 3 key takeaways for our presentation. So Gary, would you be kind enough to share with us these 3 takeaways and your perspective?
Sure, absolutely. So, there are incredible companies all over the world that have a chance to become unicorns, but they just don't have the opportunity. What we are is an enabler. We're a venture builder to help those companies to be able to achieve their goals. We do this by developing relationships, partnerships, friendships all over the world. Today, we're in 47 countries, and we have ambassadors and companies there and growing. So I'm happy to talk to you at any time, or have somebody from my team talk to you. If you have a startup that's out there that's interested in going global, give us a call. I'd be happy, or send us a message. Happy to talk to you. You can get me on Signal or WhatsApp. But the one thing is, don't sit on your hands. If you have an idea and you want to move forward, let us shape it. And then at the same time, there are people like Mark and some of Mark's contacts. Some of the people that want to invest in those technologies, it's kind of like fishing, right? You got to go to the right lake with the fish. In our case, the lake is stocked and the fish want to get caught. So it's a good relationship. The fishermen want to fish and the fish want to get caught. Well, the startups want to get caught. They want to be funded. They want to grow their business. So reach out. Let's all create an incredible entrepreneur-friendly network. And that's what GSD is all about.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I would like to open it up for any questions that people have. And if there aren't questions, I'm not saying there will or won't be, but we can also talk about some of these other unicorn opportunities that Gary is seeing out there. But first, let's open it up for any questions. So feel free to.
I see the questions here. So Charles, AI touches nearly every industry. Does GSD have a specific niche? We look at it as AI as a horizontal, Charles, and not a vertical. So we can use the same AI models and machine learning models across multiple vertical markets. What we're looking at is where there are opportunities, the application of the AI. So it's not a specific niche. It's really, of course, we're looking at things like supply chain, farming 4.0, industry 4.0, robotics, sure. But they're ones, generally the companies that come to us are ones that have revenue. They're really ready to take off. They're not like early stage. They traditionally have anywhere from, we've have $10 million worth of revenue, but I would say 300,000 to $1.5 million in revenue. They're ready to go global, and we're just enabling them.
I just want to make a couple comments about AI because healthcare is near indeed a bridge point, and I just want to give a true example. If you have a radiology exam, basically 20% of radiology reports are misread today, 20%. And that's because the doctors are too busy or they just make a human error. If you apply AI to those radiology exams, the error rate goes down to 0.01. So has a dramatic impact on the efficacy of radiology exams. And just to give you a real life example, I was skiing with my family in Park City, Utah about 4 years ago, and I was pleading with my son last run of the day, take it easy, this is where you get hurt, etc. Of course, he didn't listen to me, took off, he wiped out, and I found him laying in the snowbank in severe pain. Long story short, he broke his collarbone. And we were at the mountain, they did the radiology exam, they said, son, you're fine, you can ski the next day. Meanwhile, his collarbone was broken. And if he did follow the recommendation and fell again, he could have died because the bone could have punctured the lung. So my point about AI and radiology and healthcare, the key is with healthcare, almost in every situation, is catch it early and don't have a misdiagnosis where you have the wrong treatment, then you have to do the catch up, which is twice as challenging and expensive, et cetera. So get it right the first time. And AI has the true opportunity to do that in healthcare. And no, radiology is one example. There's dozens and dozens and dozens of them. But Gary, anything you want to share AI related to healthcare? I know you mentioned what happened with Moderna and Pfizer with their COVID vaccines, but even on just drug discovery in general, anything you want to share with AI?
I mean, there's so much. I mean, things like Neuralink, Elon Musk, the technology's coming out, nanobots throughout your bloodstream. So artificial intelligence and nanobots to clean the cholesterol out, repair your heart. These are breakthrough technologies. I wrote an article, it's Living to 150 in Forbes. If you get a chance, take a look at it. It's, our lives, the drugs, think about it. We look at it today, how many drugs are going to be developed that would never had a chance 10 years ago because of these technologies to discover without having to kill people or dogs or other animals, to be able to model those drugs to make them better for us and to be able to imagine being able to tie it into your DNA. So drugs specifically for you that react for you. I went to my doctor last week and he said, there's new cancer screening. They use DNA to be able to look at residual cancer. So whatever organ of your body it's in, it tells you what's happening so you can catch it before it's a problem. Those technologies are in front of us. We're going to live to 150. It's not, if it's going to happen, it's when it's going to happen. In my view, it's going to happen, sooner than later. The next 20, 30 years are going to be evolutionary for us, revolutionary.
Well, you're hitting on a couple of mega themes in healthcare. One is the personalization of healthcare. So today, when you make a blockbuster drug, it's designed to be consumed by the masses. Now, you can call it the least common denominator if you want, but basically, if you personalize that medicine, so it's targeting you, its efficacy can and should be dramatically better because it's targeted for you specifically and the way your body's built, et cetera. And also with these technologies, you can get them to market faster. And that is a huge challenge. To get a drug to market, it's got to be safe and effective. And many, many times, cancer is a good example of it. You can tell if it's killing cancer cells. You know it is effective. Is it safe? You don't really ever know until you put it in people. So
yeah, well, that's it. And the situation is, do you want to use humans for the trials, or do you want to be able to use artificial intelligence and drug modeling so you don't have to worry about that? And then imagine the capability of being able to take somebody's DNA without ever having to have them, tested on it, check it to see what is the right combination. Is it lethal or is it great?
And even the things like lethal, this conversation is not intending to be a drug discovery conversation, but suffice it to say, a medicine, think of it as a complex molecule, the active ingredient. You can adjust that molecule to adjust its risk or safety profile. So there might be something with the current molecule that if you made a slight amendment to it, it would be safe and it's effective. So there's just so many things that are unlocked with these technologies that in the past were basically, I'll just say, dead on arrival when you put it into humans and you had a side effect. And I'll just say this, in America and frankly globally, you can have a medicine that has a side effect. And if you do, the drug companies don't want to touch it because they're going to get sued. It may be a side effect that, I'm making it up, 2% of the people that consume it, well, those 2% are going to sue, and the drug companies are forced to take those drugs off the market. So there are many technologies and solutions that never see the light of day because of this phenomenon. So things like AI, machine learning.
And that's a sad world too, Mark, because the reason is people don't want to take risks. But if you do this, you're using to my point, to your point, if you're using artificial intelligence, you lower the risk because you know what's going to happen before it becomes a problem.
Yeah, well said. I don't want this to be a healthcare dissertation, but I'll just say one more thing. With what Pfizer and Moderna did with the mRNA technology to launch a vaccine, it was incredibly successful, record time, and efficacious. But the reality is, vaccines are a good thing to treat illnesses. And big pharma has massively underinvested in vaccines. You might say, well, why? The fact is, if you're a kid and you take a vaccine and it does something harmful to you, that has a huge liability risk to the pharmaceutical companies. For that reason, they don't want to touch it. So
exactly.
So again,
the thing is, people die because they don't. That's the problem. Is they're so afraid of risk. If you have an approach where it's going to work based on DNA, this is the way to do it. This hyper-personalized medicine is going to come. It's happening now.
Well, you're absolutely right. So thank you for that. I think we have time for one or two more questions from the audience if we have them. If not, I can let Gary give us his.
There's a question here, Charles. So we do have those contacts, the domain expertise, and machine learning and deep learning. So what we can go down through those models to be able to support and help. We're not building it, we're guiding it. So but we do that all the time. I mean, it's my own personal background is artificial intelligence. So as a businessman and not as a developer.
Okay. I think maybe Gary, with the couple minutes we have left, you want to share any other breakthrough opportunities you're seeing out there to give us a pulse of what's happening in the market?
Yeah, this is one of the greatest times. I mean, in fact, you're enlightening, Mark, because we talk about people and their investing. I mean, the way you do create wealth is you have to partition, part of. And I'm not giving advice in terms of investment planning. I'm just telling you my own personal background. You got to invest in companies that are going to make a dent in the universe. We know things. We know we have challenges with global warming, technology to be able to help us to make it better and to adapt. We know we're going to run out of fossil fuels, so battery technologies and electric cars are going to be really important for us. We know we've got 6 billion Earth-like planets in Milky Way and 2.2 trillion galaxies in the universe. We got a whole lot of exploring we can do as humanity. So these kind of things, my suggestion is we use the IoT, we use our computer vision, we use our artificial intelligence, machine learning, and quantum computers to make the world a bit better place. We need to distribute the opportunity out to everybody, in my opinion, because we need us to all think collectively how to solve the problems, and more importantly, how to make all our lives better. And these are great, not only are these great opportunities to make humanity better, but they're great potential investment opportunities if you do it the right way. I remember sitting in, Robinhood was in my office out in California, and so did TikTok when they started. So we're in the same building. And I remember Zoom at the beginning when I first met those folks. And they were talking about their vision. And who could have thought at the time it would be as grand as it is today? But if you want to get in, look at where the market is. We're going to connect together. We have a lot of challenges to solve. And these companies that are out there, we can support them, help them, and more importantly, invest and make money on opportunities like that.
Well, that's a
Hey,
beautiful.
Mark.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Mark, this is Muthu. I have a quick question for Gary.
Sure.
Hey, Gary, nice presentation. Thank you. With the quantum computers advancing, there are desktop quantum computers coming up right now.
Yes.
So how soon or what's the path it'll lead in terms of blockchain technologies? Like how soon the marriage will happen, quantum computing?
Well, and that's a very interesting question, because it's not just the blockchain, it's quantum computers. And here's the other challenge. So quantum computers can break, we'll get to a point where you have Bitcoin. They're saying by this year in 2027, with quantum nefarious characters using quantum computers, they're going to be able to break the Bitcoin, right? And some of these cryptocurrencies. So on the one side, we got to have incredible, it's on one side we have these quantum computers. At the other side, we have to have one to be able to protect us from the other. So we've got to have almost a shield, a quantum shield to protect us from these nefarious systems that are working so quickly, they can decipher everything. So in terms of where the desktop, I don't know, it's going to take some time. It's just like the evolution of the PC. They started back in, the minis started back in the late 60s, and it wasn't until the late 70s when we started to see Apple. It's going to be an evolution, but it'll start happening in an education institution, in my opinion, over the next, 5 years, 8 years. It's just, there's a lot to work out, and we've got to make sure that the architecture is, you're dealing with photons and other technologies, that the architecture is suitable and ready for the commercial market, shall we say. It's not quite there yet. There's certain problems that can be solved and others that can't, but we're getting there. So my guess is, 5 years plus when we're going to start to see things. So, and I don't know if it's going to be desktop, but more like desk size.
Correct. Workstations. Yeah. Right. Thank you.
If you get a chance, by the way, I had Prania, who's the head of the quantum lab at Harvard. She's an amazing lady. And so if you're listening to this, Prania, thanks for your advice. But Prania was on my show, and we talked about the evolution of quantum computers. She's actually the lab at Harvard is named after her, and she's, less than 35, brilliant. So if you get a chance, she's a lot smarter than I am. I'm just a country boy, but if you want, you can listen to the podcast and check it out. But she's incredible. If you need to follow up, if you have any questions, follow up with me. Connect with me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I did send you the LinkedIn request. Thank you.
Sure.
Okie dokie. Well, listen, I thought this was an incredibly enlightening conversation. So, Gary, on behalf of Bridgepoint and the entire team, thank you very much for sharing your expertise with us. I know I got a lot out of it, and hopefully other people did as well. just so everyone knows, next Thursday is our next scheduled podcast. Hopefully we'll see everyone on that. We'll send out a couple things after this call. We'll have essentially a link to this podcast. So if people want to consume it again, it's available. It'll also be posted on our YouTube channel, as well as other social media outlets. And again, thank you so much for your attendance today, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.